if you make the wrong decision, if it's a two-way door decision, you walk out the door, you pick a door, you walk out, and you spend a little time there. It turns out to be the wrong decision. You can come back in and pick another door. Some decisions are so consequential and so important and so hard to reverse that they really are one-way door decisions. You go in that door, you're not coming back. And those decisions have to be made very deliberately, very carefully. If you can think of yet another way to analyze the decision, you should slow down and do that. So, when I was CEO of Amazon, I often found myself in the position of being the chief slowdown officer because somebody would be bringing me a one-way door decision. And I would say, okay, I can think of 3 more ways to analyze that. So let's go do that because we are not going to be able to reverse this one easily. Maybe you can reverse it, but it's going to be very costly and very time consuming. We really have to get this one right from the beginning. And, what happens, unfortunately, in companies, what can happen is that you have a one-size-fits-all decision-making process where you end up using the heavyweight process on all decisions.
For everything, yeah.
Including the lightweight ones, the two-way door decisions. Two-way door decisions should mostly be made by single individuals or by very small teams deep in the organization. And one-way door decisions are the ones that are the irreversible ones. Those are the ones that should be elevated up to, the senior most executives who should slow them down and make sure that the right thing is being done.
Yeah. I mean, part of the skill here is to know the difference between one way and two way. I think you mentioned,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned Amazon Prime, the decision to sort of create Amazon Prime as a one-way door. I mean, it's unclear if it is or not, but it probably is. And it's a really big risk to go there.
There are a bunch of decisions like that are, changing the decision is going to be very, very complicated. Some of them are technical decisions too, because some technical decisions are like quick drying cement. If you're once you make them, it gets really hard. I mean, choosing which propellants to use in a vehicle, selecting LNG for the booster stage and selecting hydrogen for the upper stage. That has turned out to be a very good decision. But if you changed your mind, that would be a very big setback. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of decision you scrutinize very, very carefully. Other things just aren't like that. Most decisions are not that way. Most decisions should be made by single individuals, but they need and done quickly in the full understanding that you can always change your mind.
Yeah, one of the things I really liked, perhaps it's not two-way door decisions, is I disagree and commit phrase. So so somebody brings up an idea to you, if it's a two-way door, you state that you don't understand enough to agree, but you still back them. I mean, I'd love for you to explain it.
Yes, disagree and commit is a really important principle that saves a lot of arguing.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to use that in my personal life. I disagree, but commit.
It's very common in any endeavor in life, in business, and anybody where you have teammates. You have a teammate and the two of you disagree.
Yeah.
At some point you have to make a decision. And, in companies, we tend to organize hierarchically. So there's this, whoever's the more senior person ultimately gets to make the decision. So ultimately the CEO gets to make that decision. And the CEO may not always make the decision that they agree with. So I would be the one who would disagree and commit. One of my direct reports would very much want to do something in a particular way. I would think it was a bad idea. I would explain my point of view. They would say, Jeff, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And we would go back and forth. And I would often say, you know what? I don't think you're right, but I'm going to gamble with you. And you're closer to the ground truth than I am. I've known you for 20 years. You have great judgment. I don't know that I'm right either. Not really, not for sure. All these decisions are complicated. Let's do it your way. But at least then you've made a decision. And I'm agreeing to commit to that decision. So I'm not going to be second guessing it. I'm not going to be sniping at it. I'm not going to be saying, I told you so. I'm going to try actively to help make sure it works. That's a really important teammate behavior. There's so many ways that dispute resolution is a really interesting thing on teams. And there are so many ways when two people disagree about something, even I'm assuming like the case where everybody's well-intentioned. They just have a very different opinion about what the right decision is. And we have in our society and inside companies, we have a bunch of mechanisms that we use to resolve these kinds of disputes. A lot of them are, I think, really bad. So an example of a really bad way of coming to agreement is compromise. So compromise, look, we're in a room here and I could say, Lex, how tall do you think this ceiling is? And you'd be like, I don't know, Jeff, maybe 12 feet tall. And I would say, I think it's 11 feet tall. Yeah. And then, we'd say, you know what? Let's just call it 11 and a half feet. That's compromise. Yeah. Instead of the right thing to do is, to get a tape measure or figure out some way of actually measuring, but getting that tape measure and figure out how to get it to the top of the ceiling and all these things, that requires energy. Compromise, the advantage of compromise as a resolution mechanism is that it's low energy. But it doesn't lead to truth. And so, in things like the height of the ceiling where truth is a knowable thing, you shouldn't allow compromise to be used when you can know the truth. Another really bad resolution mechanism that happens all the time is just who's more stubborn. Yeah. This is also, so you have, let's say, two executives who disagree and they just have a war of attrition. And whichever one gets exhausted first capitulates to the other one. Again, you haven't arrived at truth. And this is very demoralizing. So, this is where escalation, I try to ask people who, on my team, to say, never get to a point where you are resolving something by, who gets exhausted first. Escalate that. I'll help you make the decision. Because that's so de-energizing and such a terrible, lousy way to make a decision.
So you want to get to the resolution as quickly as possible because that ultimately leads to a high velocity of decision.
Yes. And you want to try to get as close to truth as possible. Yeah. So you want, exhausting the other person is not truth seeking.
Yes.
And compromise is not truth seeking. So, it doesn't mean, and there are a lot of cases where no one knows the real truth, and that's where disagree and commit can come in. But escalation is better than war of attrition. Escalate to your boss and say, hey, we can't agree on this. We like each other. We're respectful of each other, but we strongly disagree with each other. We need you to, make a decision here so we can move forward. But decisiveness, moving forward quickly on decisions as quickly as you responsibly can is how you increase velocity. Most of what slows things down is taking too long to make decisions at all skill levels, so it has to be part of the culture to get high velocity. Amazon has 1.5 million people and the company is still fast. We're still decisive. We're still quick. And that's because the culture supports that.
At every scale in a distributed way,
yes.
Trying to maximize the velocity of decisions.
Exactly.